Now, I do have an apology to make. I am not Ian Turton. So Ian Turton did this talk like in Seoul, Korea, in like 2015, and um, he's a really funny guy. So we've got this idea that if you're a native speaker of English, such as myself, that you can speak very clearly, but Ian is actually from the UK, and he's got this wonderful, entertaining way of like weaponizing the language so that you can laugh at him, and then he invites you to laugh at yourself. And he's a very engaging, humorous speaker. Sadly, Ian can't make it, and you just get me. Yeah. So, who is this talk for? This talk is an interesting one at FOSS4GE. It's for users of open source, free and open source software. It's for managers struggling to understand how to interact with open source projects, and it's kind of for developers who use open source library, but it's not really for project developers. So this is a kind of a different talk for me. Um, yeah. So who am I? I am not Ian Turton. Ian Turton has been developing GeoTools now for over 30 years, which is impressive. So he actually started GeoTools like in the 90s, back when Java was version 1. And he's a contributor to GeoServer and the QGIS community. He's a community moderator on GIS Stack Exchange. Here is use GIS Stack Exchange. Who here has had Ian Turton reply to one of your questions? Pardon? Like IJ Turton or something like that? Yeah. And then he's also spent a lot of time teaching hapless students how to embarrass themselves with a map. So a defining characteristic of Ian is that he's kind and he helps others. And he's just been doing that and really making our FOSS4G community a warm and welcoming place for a couple decades now. Yeah, so he's really sorry he can't be here to entertain you today. He's run into some health troubles. There's a picture of him from like a hospital bed. He's returned home now, and he's sending snarky little email updates to me online and to you. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so I'm sorry I'm not Ian. Now, we've all got this idea that open source is great. That we can save a fortune on licensing costs and maintenance and support. And I don't know, what else can we save money on an open source? So we've all got this idea that open source is great and it's going to make our life so much easier. I personally have lots of other ideas about how open source is great. I can take greater control. I can have my digital sovereignty. Saving. Louder, okay. I'm literally just falling through the stage here. So then we've also got the idea that open source is no good. There's no support for open source. What happens if something goes wrong? My map's not being displayed and there's a hurricane on the way. Who can I sue? I certainly can't sue Ian. Ian doesn't have any money. Without a big corporation behind things, who is going to be liable for this? And this extends into 20, 10 years. This is actually really being felt in the European places around the world as governments really look to regulate open source software. We just had a big upset with a log4j security vulnerability, and it cost the EU, hundreds of millions of dollars. They'd love to know who to sue for that, but it's it's an open source project, and so they're trying to sue anybody who's had this problem, and it's an interesting one. So we do have this concept that open source is no good. And from the initial keynote that Ian was presenting at, they had this advantages of FOSS4GE versus propriety. And I can't really read the slide here to know what was going on, but it is definitely put up as a Oh, I'm trying to remember what was said here. So that FOSS4GE keynote was a long time ago. Although I guess we just had the little keynote um, from your own about open source wishing to be more of a product and wanting to have uh, more of an experience. So one thing to note is you can buy your support. So if you were happy paying Esri or Oracle for maintenance, you could continue to buy open source from software developers and get actual bugs fixed. There's a whole ecosystem of service providers on the OSGeo website, and we're actually doing a much better job 10 years on celebrating and bringing those open source service providers to the attention of our user community. You also get to determine the direction of development, and folks do write more and better code if they're being paid for it, if they're not doing it in their spare time, if they're not grad students. So this is something that's actually improved in the last 10 years. People are getting the hang of it that open source does cost money and does take funding to be sustained. This is certainly an area where we can improve, but it's something where our community is not entirely ignorant now. So if you don't have money, there's ways in which you can earn your support. So rather than paying with money, you're going to pay with time. So that's fine. And we're going to talk this presentation is going to cover a few ways in which you can earn your support. But please keep in mind, you can't demand support. So, dear Internet, open source means free software, not free developers who drop everything to work on your problem when you need them. 10 years ago, we had Howard Butler, nothing peeves me more than my company depends on you fixing your free software bug. When is it fixed? And just we have this one from Ben Ramsey, where a key library, the maintainer is stepping down. Sorry, a key library, libxslt, the maintainer is stepping down because he's been overwhelmed with really demanding security vulnerability reports. So, a section where we're around security vulnerabilities. So, how do you earn your support? To start with, be polite. You are asking for a favor. Developers are people too. Care to show the project team behind every software project, to really communicate that open source software is made up of people, just like Silent Green. Where to talk to developers. So choose the right forum. Don't send the same message to all of them. As a developer, you often wake up and you see the same message on social media and different forums and directly emailed to you when someone's having a crisis. So mailing lists. Mailing lists are still a thing for developers. A few of our software projects still maintain mailing lists. Use the right list. Use a discussion or a user list, not the devel list where the developer's development occurs. Never send email directly to a developer. You are not their customer. You are not their mother. You don't know them. So don't send them a personal email. Each mailing list does have some kind of etiquette guideline for how they expect communication to occur. This is something that's gotten better in the last 10 years. Almost all of the software projects have introduced some kind of code of conduct in order to write down the kind of polite communication that is expected by that community. And do keep the discussion on the list. That is especially difficult with email, where you need to hit reply to all rather than reply. And here's an interesting one. 10 years ago, we had this thing called Nabble, which was a user forum that would slurp up email lists. And we'd often have people on these user forum asking questions and saying, why isn't anyone getting back to me? So they would be ignorant that it was a mailing list and not a website. At the moment, we've had projects start to set up their own user forums, which are really good for Markdown and XML code examples. Use the right forum, a user forum, not a developer forum, and don't use social media or direct messages, and check out the posting guidelines on the forum. So this is an area where Nabble is no longer, but many of the projects have started to adopt user forums and moving away from email lists. In part because we can't convince kind of our modern internet users to actually sign up for a mailing list. It's too much bother. Stack Exchange, if it's a geography question, ask on GIS Stack Exchange. If it's a programming question, ask on Stack Overflow. This site is still very active, although I think it's started to be used or enter into arrangements to be used for training AI. And so a lot of developers I know have started to move away from Stack Exchange. Stack Exchange is a question and answer forum, so do keep that in mind. It's not used for political theater or open source theater. Try and ask very clear questions. So if you ask a poor question, you get a poor response. So this is an example of a very detailed question which no one can read from the back. How to convert a SIG file to CSV or ARFF. I'm not sure I personally know what those file formats are. Yeah. So feedback, the classic XKCD example. If a developer goes to the trouble of answering a question, or if you figure out the answer to your question, please tell the user forum. Please help others learn from your misadventure. And how to ask a good question. There's an example here from Eric Raymond. I'm not going to dare click on it, but it is a classic one which goes to show how to write very clear questions. How to talk to developers. Be polite. Summon your inner Canadian. Be respectful and be patient. The developers are very busy folks, and yeah, please respect their time. So be polite. Your software sucks. It can't even do foo. Is a bad example of how to start a relationship. I was trying to do foo, but instead this happened. Is a much more appropriate, non-confrontational way to approach. Be respectful. I don't really care about geography, so if you can do the following for me. We've all seen these kind of questions. Usually it's a student trying to work on their homework. A nicer way to approach this is, where can I learn how to do the following? Be patient. There's lots of examples of people coming back to their question after a few minutes or a few hours or a few days and saying, any updates on this? Is anyone watching this issue tracker? Does anyone read this list? Instead, offer to help. If you're asking a question, maybe volunteer to report it to the issue tracker. And then do some research. If you're stuck because you're new to a library, go and check if there's any tutorials or documentation that can help you. There's an example here. I plan to use GeoTools. I saw that there's an Oracle plugin available, but the documentation is not very detailed. Are there any examples or documentation available to access? So this is the classic RTFM cartoon here. Please do read the documentation. Folks have taken the trouble to write it for you. And this is something that's actually changed in the last couple of years. So an advantage here for open source is you can actually RTFS, which is read the source code. So you can actually go and read the source code where the problem occurs. And here's a little step-by-step example where people are stepping through the source code and trying to determine exactly where a problem occurred. So it is hard to read the source code, but it is certainly possible. And then this is something that it's to keep in mind. You can actually read the source code on the web, going directly to the project's GitLab or GitHub page and browsing through the source code and try and see for yourself where the problem occurred. And then you can also ask someone else, in this case an bot, to look at the source code for you. So this is an example from DeepWiki, where it's going through the GeoTools source code and it's building up a nice report for you, telling you how it's working and how it's functioning. So you don't have to read the source code alone. There are better ways to earn respect. Um, you could get to know the developers before you have a problem, help out answering questions on the user list, build up some social credit, as it were, before be position to ask for help. So how can I help out? I work through the quick. For developers, how to talk to users. Be gentle. I know you're stressed for time, but take a moment to be polite. If someone's being really rude or mean, try to not confront them in public. For the first offense, talk to them offline and say, hey, that's really not appropriate behavior. And if you don't know the answer, and this is something I'm really guilty of, don't volunteer to help. You just add confusion. So I'm well known for adding confusion. And if you can't help, don't hinder, and ask questions for more details and help your community learn from the answer. This is something we really appreciate by moving to a user forum. We can actually flag the response that answers the question. So, conclusion, never assume you are entitled to an answer. You are not. You really aren't. You're not paying for the service. You will earn an answer if you earn it by asking substantial, interesting, thought-provoking questions. One that implicitly contributes to the experience of the community, rather than merely passively demanding knowledge from others. This is a place where we've actually seen an improvement. So we have seen very direct, kind of grumpy, demanding emails 10 years ago. Now that we've moved to a user forum, which is very obviously public, people are being far more respectful of each other and respectful of the developer community. So it's been a really positive experiment that we've tried out, especially with the GeoServer project. So Ian's contact details largely remained the same. He's no longer on Twitter. He's no longer on Google+, but he has moved over to Mastodon. So I think that's it for time. I'm very happy to take questions, and I would like to thank Ian for this talk, and I'm really sorry he couldn't be with us today.